Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to the worst books that I read in 2021. By this title, I mean books that I had high expectations for and they turned out to be disappointing, and then I just found their writing subpar or really not enjoyable overall. So I've got a bunch of books here. Unfortunately, I was hoping for a better reading year than this, but here we are. So the first one that I want to discuss is A History of What Comes Next by Sylvain Nouvelle. And this is a novella, but it's the first novella in a novella series, and I've read from Sylvain Nouvelle before, really enjoyed his stuff, but this one just really hit underneath my expectations, and for that reason it was very disappointing. So it follows a series of women across multiple times. We're presently in a time with a young girl and her mother, and these generations of women aren't humans, and they seem to be connected somehow to either alien forces, magic, or something beyond the stars. And it is their ongoing mission to move humans from Earth onto a different planet in order to save them, I think. But the way it was executed in this story, it was a historical sci-fi, and I don't like historical fiction. I thought I love books like The Book Thief, for example, and I gave it about 3 stars. So they're just not really for me. And so I went into this with trepidation because I was like, I don't like part of that genre category, but I know that I like Sylvain Nouvelle and I like the ideas and the identities that he tends to put in his work. I loved his novella previously called The Test, I think, and then I also really adored his Themis Files books, which the first one starts out with Sleeping Giants. I loved those books. And so when I went into this one, I was expecting to connect to the characters. I was expecting some interesting cultural nuance here. But what he did is he really honed in on like a female versus male perspective. And he was trying to do too much, I think, with what he had and the time he gave himself. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the pace. I didn't connect to the characters. I found the execution of the story really disappointing. And all of the things that the characters were doing, they may as well have not bothered because it was historical sci-fi, right? So all of this was centered around the space race. And so despite these characters being involved, I think the things that happened in the plot would have occurred anyway, whether they were involved or not. So it just felt like it was not really making a point. It wasn't digging its heels in. It wasn't really having any traction or telling me why I should love it. So I'm not going to continue the series. I didn't really like it, and I believe I gave it 2 stars. Thankfully, I don't have any 1-star books on this list. At least I don't believe so. Maybe one of them should qualify as a 1-star, but I did like other things about it, so I'll get to that later in the video. And then after that, we go into a very happy looking book, but it didn't make me very happy, and that is The 22 Motors of Madison May. Again, science fiction, but it's science fiction set in our world, and it follows a woman who is a journalist or a reporter or something, and she stumbles onto this case where people keep getting murdered, and she gets really caught up in it by mistake. And what happens here is there is a serial killer and he's murdering this woman, Madison May, in alternate timelines and parallel universes. And this reporter / journalist accidentally gets sucked into one, and now she has to help solve the murder, help stop the murderer, and try and get herself out of this parallel universe. And so it had really cool things going for it. And again, I generally read from authors that I've already enjoyed, and I really liked Lexicon by the same author, but I read this years ago. So when I went into this book, I was like, parallel universe, sci-fi, murder mystery, this is going to be rad. It was not rad. I did not like the characters again. There were plot points in here that seemed to be just dropped into the story, and then the book ended and I was like, hang on, what was the resolution for A, B, C, and D? It just kind of left it hanging, and not in a good way, not in a way that piques your interest and makes you think of these characters after the book ends. It was a, hang on, this seems like bad writing, poor storytelling, or just laziness, or the author just forgot about them in general, or they were advised not to continue writing about them because it would make the book longer. I don't know, but in terms of the ending, I didn't like it. In terms of the characters, I didn't like her either. In terms of what happened in the story and the pace in general, wasn't really for me. So I did not like this one either. Very disappointed given that this was sent to me by a publisher and it was from an author that I've already read from. I really feel like I've been burned by these books. And then speaking of being burned by books, I have a ripper next. The first book in this series I really liked and I gave it 4 stars. The second book in this series I really didn't like and I gave it 2 stars. This is the second book in the Wheel of Time series, and this put me in a 6-month-long reading slump, and to be perfectly honest, I have no idea why I continued to read this. I just felt like I was obligated almost, because I had started behind the scenes a spoiler vlog of all of my thoughts while I was reading this. And I did this with this book and another book this year, and I gave both of them 2 stars. And I'm a person who's generally pretty good at DNFing books and putting them down and stopping because I'm not enjoying them. However, for some reason, this and the other book I'll talk about later are the 2 outliers, and I do not have any inkling as to why I stuck with them, given how frustrated they made me. So Wheel of Time was really amazing with the first book, The Eye of the World. I have a separate Wheel of Time playlist, so if you want to see my content for it, I'll link it below separately to this video. But I loved that book. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. It centers on a quest and a small town. So these characters in a small town, Rand is one of them, Matt and Perrin are the 2 others. There are a few girls as well. They all get picked up by Moraine and Lan. So Moraine is a witch and Aes Sedai in this world, and obviously she's got magical powers. Lan is like her guardian or her protector. He's her swordmaster, and so because somebody in the group, they don't know who, is being hunted by the Trollocs, which are these monsters, they have to leave the small town. So it has a quest trope with all of these small town characters who haven't experienced the world yet, getting on the road, trying to escape the Dark One, trying to escape these monsters, trying to escape evil, trying to learn and understand the concepts of magic, and trying to go to different places away from their small town and acclimatize to these places. So there were interesting tropes in the first book that I was quite intrigued by, and the characters interested me. But when it came to this book, it just felt like we were going 1 step forward and 27 steps backwards, because with all of the miscommunication, with all of the plotting in this book, it felt like it could be reduced to less than half the length. And this is about 700 pages long. It really felt like it was just blowing air a lot of the time, and it had a few instances of, oh, I'll just drop this thing into the plot and then I won't talk about it. But I'm like, hang on a second, you've already introduced it. That is already clearly a thing that we're now starting to think about. So why did you A, not foreshadow it before, B, foreshadow it now so clumsily, and then C, not talk about it in an ongoing basis? Because I'm now intrigued and now I'm frustrated because you've told me like a dangling carrot there is this thing that we want to talk about, or this character, etc. And now you're not continuing that? Very annoying. So I was really disappointed by this, if you couldn't tell. If you want all of my spoiler thoughts, I did that spoiler vlog, of course, but honestly, if you're reading The Wheel of Time and you love the first book, I don't know how you're going to go with this one if you're a modern fantasy reader like me. I don't know what it is. I just could not get past the miscommunication. It is one of my most hated tropes ever. I just hated them. So I really want to try the third book and see if I like it, because I've given obviously a 4 stars and then a 2 stars. But at the same time, this plus another 700-page book put me in a massive reading slump and a massive tantrum, cranky reading mood. So I don't know how I'm going to go. I don't really think I want to read the third book, but I also think I do. Really depends on the time of day, the time of the minute, and when you ask me in general, and what my reading mood is. So maybe I will start the third book and just not tell anyone, and then if it's crap, I'll DNF it. Maybe if I like it, I'll make a vlog for it. I honestly don't know. I don't see myself starting it next year. At the moment, the Wheel of Time series is temporarily DNF'd. And now after that one, we have Bitch Planet Volume 1, and that is a comic series that, again, more sci-fi, which is quite annoying because I really want to love more sci-fi, and I feel like I'm just picking the duds for my reading taste, which is quite frustrating. But Bitch Planet is a book that follows, or a graphic novel that follows, a series of characters. They're in an arena kind of scenario, and they're all women and they're trying to survive. So based on that kind of premise, I was quite interested, but it incorporated advertising, political intrigue. It was introducing all these characters at the same time, and the arena wasn't really that climactic. So I struggled again to connect to the characters. I struggled to connect to the world. I struggled to care about anything just because everything was introduced so quickly. I didn't really care about what was being introduced, even though it probably was generally interesting. It just felt like this book was trying to do too much with what it was trying to juggle. So I didn't like it. I didn't connect to the characters. I'm not going to continue. I got this on sale from my bookstore. It had like a little sale section and it was getting rid of them. So I got the first 2 volumes and now I have much regret. So those are going to be immediately unhauled and I did not start the 2nd volume. And now second last, we have King of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. This is the 2nd book in his Broken Empire trilogy. And this is about Jorg. And Jorg is a young boy in the first book, Prince of Thorns. I again have a spoiler vlog for that one. And for some reason, I did not DNF that one either. I'm very proud of myself, but also very questionable. Anyway, this book is about Jorg and it follows directly on from the first one. So I can't really say too much about this one in general, but I'll try and be vague to sum stuff up. So Jorg is 11 and 13 in the first book and we get alternating timelines and he is going pretty much on a revenge quest. He has renounced his throne. He's gone off to join a band of brothers in the wilderness and get revenge for the murders of his mother and his brother because his father sat back and did nothing. And so Jorg was like, this is crap. I'm going to go and avenge them. And he goes off. So this is a continuation of obviously those adventures, and Jorg is not a heroic kind of character. He's not even a rogue that has questionable morals but will ultimately do the good thing because it is the good thing to do. So I found it really hard to connect with him as a character, even though generally I found stuff interesting in here. And I don't like the characters surrounding him either. I might like maybe one a little bit. Honestly, I was more interested in Macon, which is the side character that follows Jorg around rather than Jorg himself. So if this was about Macon, I'd be way more interested. But the way that this was told, again, is Mark Lawrence's writing feels quite vague at times. And it's like he sets up for massive climactic scenes and then something happens as a huge turning point in the book and it's executed in maybe a sentence. And so it's very frustrating and just kind of disappointing to read all of this anticipation and then to get to that point and it just be summed up really quickly and neatly, and then they go off and do something else straight afterwards. So I really struggled to mentally place the characters where they physically were while I was reading this as well. I just find that Mark Lawrence's descriptions really were lackluster to me. But then when it came to some of the action sequences, he built those up so well. And I read this because my partner really wanted me to read this series because he has read and loved this series, and he read it and loved it because of the cinematic scenes in here, and that's ultimately why I continued reading this. I'm not going to continue on to the 3rd book. So I liked the cinematic scenes. There were a couple smattered through here, but ultimately I'm really not vibing the rest of the book. I don't like Jorg. I don't like the surrounding characters. So why would I continue? Why would I bother? The climactic scenes in here are better than the ones in book 1, so that's why I was encouraged to read further on. But as it stands, this series is also DNF'd for me, and I'm definitely not going to be reading the 3rd book. I've already asked my partner how it ends, so it would be silly to read the 3rd book. And then finally, we have the last book on this list, the one that I said might warrant a 1-star rating at the beginning of this video because I was so frustrated and ranty about it. However, there were a few things in here that I did like, so I feel like I can't give it a 1-star, so I stuck it at 2. And that is Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff, a very renowned, well-loved book. Although from the comments on my spoiler vlog, because yes, I did a spoiler vlog for this one as well, this one and The Great Hunt can just go and sit in the corner. It has a lot of good reviews and a lot of hype and a lot of marketing surrounding it. So I was only seeing all of the hype and the love for this book. And then when I read it, I was like, hang on a second, I think I hated this a little. Where are all the people that did not like it like me? Surely they exist. And they proved that they do on my comments section. So thank you for validating me. That said, if you like this book, then there's nothing wrong with that. But I just found that I was an unpopular opinion in terms of pitting me against the hype. So it was interesting to see that people also didn't like it. And it's also pretty cool to see that people loved this book for the reasons I hated it. That's why I love making videos and discussing books, because people just come out of the woodwork and they're like, you know, all the things that you said, yeah, I loved those and I related to them. So I loved this book. So when I look at this, I go, I couldn't connect to Gabriel. I couldn't connect to the side characters. I didn't really get the world building because it was loosely described, but it wasn't enough. I was interested in characters that weren't side characters that came in sometimes, and so it had merits to me, but nothing that could elevate my rating. So this is about Gabe, and he is a 35-year-old man looking back at his life and chronicling it for a vampire. He's stuck in a cell in present day. And so this vampire is like we need to know where the Holy Grail is. You need to tell us. And so Gabriel is like, fine, I'm stuck here. I guess I have to. Obviously not in those words. He's a lot more abrasive than that. And that's one of the things that got me a little bit confused with his character, because the way that this is written is very flowery and very purple prosy, and then you get to Gabriel and he's quite vulgar and he's very sweary, and every single chapter in this pretty much ended on a one-liner with the F-bomb in it, which was very overdone and very edgelord-esque in quality. So I kind of had cognitive dissonance when I was reading this, because it would set up some things and then it would just bring other characters in that were swearing to their teeth, and I was like, hang on a second, this doesn't really fit the right vibe for the world to me. So I was confused about that. I also just did not, again, like the characters. There were a set of side characters that I liked, and I also saw a lot, basically all of the plot twists bar one, which wasn't foreshadowed, coming in this. And that's not like I'm bragging at all. It's just frustrating that my mind was like, oh, I bet this, and this are going to happen in quick succession. And then those things did happen. So it was very annoying that my brain mapped out the book for me as I was reading it. And it was also probably because I was discussing it for a spoiler vlog. So I would get down into the detail and pause every now and then to reflect. So I did give myself time to make those predictions, but at the same time, when a book goes into a trope or an archetype and then it doesn't subvert that in the next page or so, it's disappointing when you predict it, because you're like, okay, they're supposed to go to this point and then the bad thing happens, and then they'd get to that point and the bad thing would happen, and then it would just carry on in the direction you expected it to, rather than pivoting on something new and then going in another direction. So it was annoying to read in that sense, because I could see everything coming. I didn't like the characters. I liked some elements of the High Lord vampires in here, and I did like two of the main characters, but I'm not going to get into who because that'll spoil you. So it had merits, I'll give it that, and it had interesting action scenes. Again, like Mark Lawrence, J. Christoph wrote the action scenes in here to be quite cinematic, and I enjoyed those a lot, but everything in between was a real slog, so I really don't see myself continuing this series. So all in all, I read all of the stuff on this Worst Books of 2021 list from authors that I had read before, and I was newly disappointed. Bar Bitch Planet, bar that author, I'd not touched their work before this year, but all of these other authors that I talked about, I had read some version of their work before. So to rely on their previous ratings and go into new stuff by them and go, actually, I don't like this at all, was rather disappointing. So if you've had anything like that happen to you, I would really be interested to know, because what if I've tried stuff out of order? What if I've tried a bad book by an author and they've actually got something good? So please recommend me stuff below. I would be very interested to know. Let me know how many worst books you've read this year, because I'd be interested to know as well how many 2 stars you've got, because I always want to read better books, but I seem to not be picking them very well for myself this year. So recommendations always welcome. But thank you again so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.